What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we finally bring to you the updated premium Battle Sisters post V coin collection deck list. I know it's been a while since I've uploaded the video on maybe on this deck or to this channel in general, but I have been really theory crafting and trying to test this deck and some other decks in particular, and I've wanted to bring a really finely tuned list that I'm really comfortable with. I didn't want to rush something out, which just replacing one or two cards to try and force the deck through. I really wanted to take my time and test with the new lists. And so that you can see them, there's two lists up here in my tabs. So we're going to go over both these decks and I'm going to tell you a little bit about both of them. So moving into post V collection, it brought us one of the most important cards to this archetype, which is now Battle Sister Mocha. This card is obscenely powerful, being good bride target, being good in hand, and being good on the field, being a great attacker, being able to be really good on defense because it sits at a continuous 19,000. So in the grade 2 game, your opponent can't just swing at it. They either have to remove it from the field or ride up to, stop getting hit by 19,000 every turn, as well as after it's pressured them for 19k, it intercepts for 10k. So it adds shield and tons of power and then advantage when you ride it. This card does pretty much everything you need for the Battle Sister Grade 2 game, and it improves the Battle Sister Grade 2 game super well. Now, the only concession you had to make now is that the fact that it is a Soul Blast cost on ride. So the issue is, with it being a Soul Blast cost on ride, we already had Soul Blasting issues with Choquette, with Fumino, with Fromage, and that leads to us, maybe going through too much soul. So the way we now counteract that is we're going to play 2 copies of Psychic Bird. Now, we had to cut some slots and move around cards to get that soul pump, so we're now only playing 2 copies of Cone Magus for our countercharging and cutting down Muffin to 2 copies. So let's go over the list in total apart from the changes. So 4 copies of Fromage, Bog Standard, 4 copies of Amaterasu, Standard, 4 copies of Mocha. Again, this card is obscenely powerful for this deck. It just does everything you want it to. 4 copies of Trifle and Choquette, Standard. I think you need to be playing all of your grade 2s because they're all obscenely powerful in the grade 2 game, and moving past it, searching Heal Guardians, having Sentinel Restrict against Protect matchups, as well as being able to +1 with a Counterblast, very strong. We moved down to 1 Fumino because we're not able to have as much soul to constantly spam the grade 3 searchers to grab our heals, but we still wanted to play it in the deck because, again, getting access to heal guards on grade 2 is so absurd. 2 copies of Cone Magus. Now, if you don't know what this card does, is when it's placed on V or rear, you can declare a card name, reveal the top card of your deck. If it's a card you declared, you countercharge 2. So it works as like the Muffin or the old Battle Sister Lemonade, just having a different condition, which is not Soul. So with cards like Torijas and Trifle, as well as Fromage, you're able to, and Panatone as well, you're able to scry the top card of your deck before you call this to get your countercharge 2 off. It is also countercharge 2 in the main phase before the battle phase, so you're able to draw a bunch of cards, get it down on the field, draw more cards, and then use Muffin to then countercharge again. So it lets you have different timings on your countercharging, so you're always having your damage flip face up, which is great. 4 copies of Torijas, this card is still really good. It's probably the best grade 1 in the deck. 1 Casada still. Drawing it early game is very strong because 18k beaters are ridiculous. When you're boosting Mocha, that's a 37k column that just pretty much every turn, because if you're constantly using Trifle and Choquette, you're normally putting heal triggers or other triggers on top, which can be very strong. 2 Panatone, you can cut the Casada and play 3 Panatone if you'd like. Either or is fine. You want to fill the soul, but you also want the aggression for the 10k. It's all very good. And on 3 copies of Magical Calico, because the grade 2 deny game is still very strong. You sometimes just want to leave a deck at 1 to 2 damage, maybe even 0 to 1, and just pump them up to 6 immediately from the Calico Ichi combo. Moving into the trigger lineups, we got 3 copies of Toto, 2 Kusanagi, 1 of the Crail Elemental Overtrigger. I still think this is the correct Overtrigger to play. WinCon is more centered on Ichikishima. Being able to play around perfect guards and protect markers with the Crail Elemental Overtrigger is very strong, because in this deck you have a lot of instances where you're not shuffling. So if you ever see the Crail Elemental Overtrigger off Choquette, it is going to the bottom of your deck. That means later on in the game, when you get to Ichikishima or when you get to Momo, and you're going to go ahead and drive check this, having that extra 100 million makes an enormous difference. Just trust me on this. It is so good. 4 Heal Guardian like normal. We're going to talk about Psychic Bird in a second, but then 2 of the Draw PG, and then 2 Muffin. So we play the Psychic Bird because, first of all, it draws a card. Put into the soul and draw a card, it cycles out, which is very, very strong because it lets you get dead cards off of Torijas or Trifle or Choquette. Lets you get these cards out of your top of your deck so you can check more triggers. So say you are going into Choquette, you put Fromage on top, you could just put Psychic Bird into the soul, draw the Fromage, and then maybe there's a trigger under it, which is very strong, and then your opponent doesn't know that you're drive checking and non-triggered, so they might overguard to play around a trigger, which is a very strong play on the deck. As well as it's putting soul back in so that you're able to afford your Fromages, your Fuminos, everything else. Calico, Panatone, plus a Psychic Bird is plenty of soul, as well as plus the Amaterasu G-Guard is just enough soul to fuel all these Soul Blast costs. This is why I really wanted to take time to tune this deck. Onto the G-Zone, I play 2 of the Gathering King, 2 of the Momo, 2 Stolen, 4 Ichi. I really wanted to cut back on some of the G-Guards and the Strides. Cut back on one of the Stride, and then cut back on one of the G-Guards to go ahead and play the 2 Stolen. There are cases where this is insanely good on first Stride because you're getting the defensive power of defensive triggers, while also accelerating GB to get into your Ichikishima if you're playing a deny game. A lot of cases, like, you're not going to be playing the deny game versus some decks, but in the games where in the matchups where it's very, very important, like when you're playing against Dolls, or any other deck that's going to combo you from like 1 to 5 or 1 to 6, you're really wanting to play that game to just put down a bunch of defensive triggers and sit on a fat hand and get into Ichi. Ichi's still very impactful, being, as broken as it is. Then Dismal is a tech option. You can play the Octagonal Magus if you want. I just prefer Dismal to protect my rear guards and keep my card advantage up. And then 1 copy of Seabreeze, because if your opponent decides to play the grade 2 game with you and you run out of gas, you can just go into Fromage, stack your triggers, and then override onto Seabreeze, which lets you use Calm Magus to unflip that damage, and then you have your GB acceleration for Ichikishima on the next turn, even if your opponent tried to stride deny you as well. So it lets you play that game of I can grade 2 game you, then I have a way to stop you from grade 2 gaming me, and the next turn you're eating Ichi because I can defend your first Stride with 3 defensive triggers. It only gets a little mucky if you don't stack correctly, or you don't have enough Battle Sisters to stack deep enough, because you want to have 5 on field to make sure that this triple drive doesn't drive check you through your triggers too fast. So this is the list I prefer playing. It is very solid. It provides a lot of good advantage. It's getting a lot of high power numbers through your trigger checks, and it's just very good in general. So the second list I have here is the reverse list. So this was playing 1 copy of the Battle Sister Fromage reverse, so you can ride up and draw a bunch of cards instead of stacking defensive triggers. This is really good into matchups against like Regalia or Dimension Police, which you need to see more cards instead of see more defensives, because defensives don't matter against big Unga Bunga numbers. So this is a deck list that you should be taking if you're having problems with those decks. So let's go ahead and talk about it. Fromage reverse is you just call a bunch of cards down, you get a ton of draws, and then normally if you have like Mochas that you locked, that's still counting as a ton of shield in your hand. So if you're getting a bunch of Mochas or you're drawing, if you're getting a bunch of Mochas or you called Mochas down, that's still, you're not really losing that much shield from calling cards out of your hands. We are able to supplement that from 1 Fromage reverse because we do have a Bamkuchen. This lets you reveal any of your grade 3s in hand. Well, reveal your Battle Sister grade 3, so reveal Fromage, and then you can go ahead and grab reverse. A good play is you're going to be using Fromage guy reverse, calling Fromage, counterboss 1, soul boss 1, drawing 2, calling reverse, drawing 5, and then you're just using reverse to unlock your field and unlock it. It's a very solid game plan. I just prefer the trigger stacking variants. So let's go ahead and get right back into the list. So 1 reverse, like I said, 4 Fromage, 4 Amaterasu, 4 Mocha, 4 Trifle, 4 Choquette. This is pretty much all the same except for the 1 copy of reverse. Then for the grade 1s, it's 4 copies of Torijas, 3 copies of Panatone, and 3 copies of Bamkuchen. You don't have as much room in this deck to play kind of cheesy tech options because you are playing reverse, which needs you to have Battle Sisters in hand and call Battle Sisters on field. For that play, you cannot be calling down a Cone Magus or a Fumino. You have to be calling down Battle Sisters to lock and unlock. So that's why we are playing a lot less like generic good cards. That's why you don't see Psychic Bird in this list. See the 4 muffins still, because you can't afford to be playing non-battle sisters, because sometimes that one draw might be the difference between having discard cost for a PG or, you know, whatever. Then we're playing 2 Calico, because this deck is deep drawing, because you're drawing about 7 to 9 cards a turn. You're doing the reverse turn, so Calico is going to be seen more often when you're drawing that many cards, so you don't need to play the extra grade 0. Moving into the triggers, it's pretty much the same lineup. Instead of 2 Succubur, we're playing 2 more Muffin. So again, if you're playing into decks that are swinging big Unga Bunga numbers that you cannot defend very well with stacking defensive triggers, I'd recommend this deck list for that local meta, because again, you're drawing 7 to 8 cards on your grade 3 right up. You don't play the grade 2 game as much because you're just going to sit on a enormous hand. To the G zone, it is the same idea with the other one. The 2 Gathering King, the 4 Ichikishima, the 2 Momo, the 2 Stolen, Fantastic Strides, the 2 Seabreeze. Again, you do the same thing with this deck that you do with the other one. In fact, it's just a little bit better with this deck, because you could just leave a Muffin and then put it on when you ride Seabreeze and you pay for that yourself. It's a little harder to manage because you don't have Cone Magus, but in some instances it can be just as good. And then one Dismal can be Octagonal Magus if you so choose. So those are the 2 decks I have for you today. If the Overtrigger ever gets banned, I really want to bring you another deck list with Ultima as a finisher / side win condition, but you know, it's not really worth it, because being able to see an Overtrigger off this stack or off, you know, this stack or off Gathering King is just way too good to like not play it. So guys, let me know what you think. Let me know what you think of this format. I wanted to go ahead and bring you guys the deck code format to see if you guys enjoyed this more, because you can go ahead and use the deck codes you see in the video to look this up yourself, so you don't have to continuously reference the video when you want to build this deck for yourself. So anyways guys, let me know what you think in the comments below, and take care.